So, some good news coming out of the Trump administration as the president has announced that the United States will supply weapons to Ukraine via NATO, with the alliance covering the full cost. In an interview with NBC News, Trump clarified, quote, "We're sending weapons to NATO. NATO is paying for those weapons 100%, end quote. Now, if you remember, Trump campaigned on the perceived cost that the United States was incurring just by merely providing weapons to Ukraine. Now, that wasn't necessarily the case. We had Lend Lease and other funding mechanisms that weren't just us giving away free weapons. But nonetheless, this overcame a major campaign point from Trump. Now, the initial $300 million package includes Patriot missiles, 155mm artillery shells, and possible Gimler's missiles. Trump emphasized that the weapons will first be transferred to NATO and then NATO will distribute them to Ukraine. Trump is using the presidential drawdown authority, which gives him the authority to expedite the transfer of U.S. stockpiled weapons and equipment. Interestingly, the agreement was finalized in June at the NATO summit with Secretary General Mark Rutte and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Merz said, quote, "I've spoken with President Trump and now I'm working closely with allies to get Ukraine the help they need," end quote. He also called on other NATO members to increase their contributions, especially in ammunition and air defenses. Germany, which is the biggest economy in Europe, has committed to procuring additional Patriot systems for Ukraine. Now, what is really fascinating here is in the time since the NATO summit in June, where Trump initially started to make the decision to send this weaponry to Ukraine via NATO, and the announcement that he actually is doing that today, Hegseth and his undersecretary shut off aid to Ukraine. So it is becoming increasingly clear that that was not supposed to happen. It served no strategic or policy purpose and made the Trump administration look internally divided. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who was actually a huge supporter of Ukraine before joining the Trump administration, said, quote, "We've encouraged NATO allies to supply weapons from their own inventories and we can facilitate financial arrangements to help restock them," end quote. And that seems to be the plan that we are witnessing right now. On top of all of this, Trump has said he will make a major statement on Russia on Monday, July 14th. Now, I don't think that statement is just going to be discussing these weapons that are going to NATO to backfill Ukraine. I think there's going to be something else, some sort of major sanctions announcement, perhaps, potentially the secondary sanctions I've talked about previously, which would absolutely cripple the Russian economy. Now, in response, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said, quote, "These deliveries are just business. Ukraine has already been receiving weapons before this development," end quote, while confirming that Russia will continue their military operations. Predictably, Russian state TV host Vladimir Solovoyev said that Russia would create radioactive tsunamis using their Poseidon nuclear-armed torpedoes. Now, part of the reason Trump might be moving in this direction is that during a recent call, Vladimir Putin said to Trump that Russia will not retreat from its core objectives in this conflict. Now, just reiterating, those core objectives include regime change in Kyiv, permanent control over Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia, which they don't militarily control right now. Russia also wants guarantees of Ukrainian neutrality and no access to NATO, as well as a full demilitarization of Ukraine and the preservation of Kremlin decision-making in Ukraine's government. That essentially makes Ukraine a puppet state to Russia and leads them down the path of just Ukraine being eliminated as a country altogether. That is generally unacceptable even for the Trump administration, it seems. So obviously, we will all wait through the weekend to see what Trump is going to say on Monday, but we are now moving in a positive direction for supporting Ukraine, because giving NATO the guarantee that we will backfill their weaponry will take the pressure off their concerns about domestic production and domestic security while also providing for the defense of Ukraine. I just wish this would have happened months ago, but better late than never, I guess.